The room went quiet after my manager said my name. Then came the sentence that shattered me. This failure falls on her. I turned slightly in my chair, waiting for him to speak up. To correct it, to tell them what really happened. He didn't. He just looked down at the table, his jaw tight, his fingers tracing the edge of his notepad. 12 people sat in that conference room. 12 witnesses to my professional execution. And the one person who could have stopped it chose silence instead. My ears rang. My hands curled into fists under the table where no one could see them. I felt exposed, like something private had been ripped open in public. My manager kept talking, but the words turned into noise. All I could focus on was him, the way he shifted in his seat, the way he refused to meet my eyes, and he let it happen. He sat there, 3 chairs away from me, and let my name become the punchline to someone else's mistake. My name is Lauren Whitaker. I'm 31 years old. For the past 4 years, I worked as a project coordinator at Bridgeway Consulting, a mid-size firm that prided itself on teamwork and innovation. And the man who stayed silent that day was the same man who told me 6 months earlier, "I've got you, always." His name was Adrian Foster. That was the moment I finally believed who he really was. Not who I wanted him to be, not who he pretended to be in private, but who he actually was when it mattered. We didn't start at work. Not officially. We started with coffee runs during long project nights, late talks about career dreams and what we wanted from life. Promises that felt real because we said them in dim lighting and quiet voices. Those promises blurred into plans. Plans blurred into us. I didn't realize how expensive love could be. Not in money. In credibility. In the slow erosion of boundaries until you can't tell where your work ends and someone else's begins. We shared ideas over breakfast. We swapped drafts late at night. We divided tasks but combined credit. I trusted him with everything, including my reputation. He took meetings I prepared him for. He pitched concepts we developed together. When praise came from leadership, it landed on him first. He smiled, he thanked them, and I told myself it didn't matter because we were a team. He never returned the favor. I see that now. Back then, I called it partnership. He spoke confidently in meetings. I filled in details quietly when asked. When leadership needed clarity, they asked him. When problems needed solving, they came to me. The pattern was so subtle that I didn't notice it becoming permanent. He got visibility, I got work. When someone praised a presentation, he said thank you without mentioning my name. When a project succeeded, he accepted congratulations like he'd done it alone. I told myself it didn't matter, that love meant supporting each other, that my turn would come. A coworker named Vanessa once pulled me aside after a meeting. She said it carefully, like she was testing the words before speaking them aloud. "You do a lot of invisible work, Lauren." I laughed it off, told her I didn't need recognition, that I was building something bigger than credit. She didn't push, she just nodded and said okay. But keep track. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. I thought she was being dramatic. Now I know she was being kind. A decision was rushed last October, not by me. Adrian had convinced leadership to accelerate a client rollout without proper testing. I warned him privately, told him the timeline was too tight. He said he'd handle it. He said trust him. When the rollout failed spectacularly, eyes turned my way. I was the project coordinator, my name was on the documentation, and he didn't correct them. He sat in that emergency meeting and let them assume I'd missed the warnings. That I'd pushed too hard. That I hadn't communicated risks. That meeting replayed in my head for days afterward. I kept seeing the way he avoided eye contact when my manager asked who approved the accelerated timeline. The way he said, there was pressure from multiple directions, instead of, I made that call. Silence can be louder than blame. It can erase you more completely than accusations. Because accusations you can fight. Silence just lets you disappear. And I started disappearing that day. From conversations, from planning meetings, from the work I'd spent 4 years building. I was sidelined within 2 weeks, reassigned to smaller projects, monitored more closely. My manager stopped including me in strategic discussions. My ideas were questioned before I finished explaining them. Meanwhile, Adrian was promoted, not immediately, but quietly. A new title, a bigger office, more responsibility. I watched it happen from the outside, realizing that my fall had cleared space for his rise. and he never once acknowledged what it cost me. He just moved forward like nothing had changed. I realized I'd been protecting him for years, editing my language so he sounded smarter, filling gaps in his knowledge so clients never noticed, taking on extra work when he was stretched thin, covering mistakes before anyone else saw them. That protection was costing me everything. My reputation, my opportunities, my sense of who I was outside of us. I'd made myself small so he could grow, and when the spotlight finally found me, it was only to blame me for something he did. I didn't argue after that meeting. I didn't accuse him privately or demand an explanation. I just stepped back. Stopped volunteering information, stopped filling silences, stopped catching problems before they reached him. And things started breaking, not loudly, not dramatically, just slowly, like a structure losing its foundation, one piece at a time. Projects he led started missing deadlines. Clients asked questions he couldn't answer. Details slipped through cracks I used to cover automatically. People started noticing, not all at once, but gradually. Emails from his projects went unanswered because I wasn't there to track them anymore. Meetings stalled because I wasn't providing the background information he relied on. Clients grew frustrated when promises weren't kept. His assistant came to me twice asking for files. I directed her to Adrian. Politely, professionally. She looked confused both times, like she expected me to just handle it. I smiled and said, "They'll know where those are." People noticed the gaps. They just didn't understand yet what was causing them. I took one step that changed everything. I requested a formal role review with HR and my manager. I came prepared with facts, documented contributions, email trails showing who created what, meeting notes proving who made which decisions, project timelines with my name attached to deliverables. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't mention Adrian once. I just presented evidence of my work and asked for my contributions to be formally recognized. I brought receipts. Not out of anger, out of necessity, because silence was costing me my career. Leadership started asking Adrian questions he couldn't answer smoothly. Who built the client database system everyone relied on? Who established the current project workflow? Who trained the last 3 new hires? He stumbled, said "we" and the team when they wanted specific names. He tried redirecting to broader strategies, but they wanted details. Operational knowledge, the kind of information you only have when you actually do the work. His confidence, usually so unshakable, started showing cracks. And people noticed those cracks, more than they'd ever noticed his charm. Suddenly, my name came up in conversations. Not as blame this time, as context, as history, as the person who knew how things actually worked. Leadership started asking me directly instead of going through Adrian. They wanted timelines, explanations, institutional knowledge I'd accumulated over 4 years. Truth doesn't rush, it accumulates quietly until it's too heavy to ignore, and the truth was becoming impossible to avoid. My role review had opened a door. Now people were walking through it, seeing what had always been there. Processes were reviewed, histories traced. Someone in leadership asked to see the original project documentation for 3 major clients. My name was on all of it. As creator, as lead coordinator, as the person who built systems Adrian had been presenting as his own innovations. Charm doesn't survive scrutiny. It works in meetings and presentations where confidence looks like competence. But when someone checks the actual work, charm becomes irrelevant. And Adrian's charm was starting to fail him in rooms where it used to carry him effortlessly. He tried to smooth things over. Professionally. Carefully. He suggested we grab coffee to catch up. Said he noticed I seemed distant. Asked if everything was okay between us. His tone was concerned, almost hurt, like I was the one pulling away unfairly. I stayed neutral, polite, professional. Told him I was focused on my own projects right now. He nodded slowly, watching me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He couldn't understand why his usual approach wasn't working, why I wasn't softening, why I wasn't making this easier for him. It became clear to leadership who had been doing the actual work and who had been presenting it. Not through accusations, through absence. When I stopped filling gaps, those gaps became visible. When I stopped covering mistakes, mistakes reached the surface. When I stopped translating his ideas into executable plans, his ideas stayed vague and unfinished. No one needed me to say it. The work spoke for itself, or rather the lack of work on his end spoke volumes. His projects slowed, mine stabilized. The contrast was impossible to miss. His authority shrank over the following weeks. Projects were quietly reassigned. Responsibilities redistributed. He was still there, still employed, still carrying his title. But the power behind that title evaporated. Leadership stopped deferring to him automatically. They started asking more questions, demanding more accountability. Power evaporates when credibility does, and his credibility was built on my invisible labor. Without that foundation, everything he'd constructed started collapsing in slow motion, and I watched it happen from a safe distance, feeling nothing but relief. I heard through Vanessa that he apologized to management, explained that he'd relied too heavily on team structures, that he took responsibility for miscommunications, that he was committed to rebuilding trust. The words were polished and strategic, exactly what you'd expect from someone who knew how to manage optics. But he never apologized to me, not privately, not professionally. Not even a brief acknowledgement of what happened in that conference room. And that silence told me everything I needed to know about who he'd always been. I was offered a new role 3 months after that conference room meeting. Team lead. Real leadership with clear authority and a seat in strategic planning discussions. The offer came with a significant raise and direct reports. My manager said they'd realized how much institutional knowledge I carried. How much I'd built that others depended on, how much they'd overlooked. I accepted without hesitation, not because I needed validation, because I'd earned it. And I was done waiting for someone else to acknowledge that. I walked past him one morning in the hallway a few weeks after accepting my new role. He was coming from a meeting, I was heading to one. Our eyes met briefly. He opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it, nodded slightly, kept walking. There was no tension, no lingering hurt, no unfinished business pulling at me. I felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, not even relief. Just nothing. And that emptiness was the clearest sign that I'd moved past him completely. Past us, past what I'd lost. I didn't block his number. I didn't unfriend him on professional networks. I didn't need to. Distance handled it naturally. He stopped appearing in my project discussions, stopped being relevant to my work, stopped occupying mental space I'd once given him freely. We existed in the same building, but moved in different orbits now. Sometimes I'd see his name on an email chain and feel nothing. No spike of emotion, no old memories surfacing. Just information. Just a name. That's how I knew I was free. Loving the wrong person almost broke me. Not the love itself, but what I sacrificed for it. The boundaries I dissolved, the credit I surrendered, the voice I softened until it disappeared. Choosing myself saved everything. The career I'd built, the reputation I'd earned. The future I almost let someone else define for me. I didn't lose him that day in the conference room. I lost the version of myself that thought love should cost credibility. That thought partnership meant making yourself smaller. That thought silence was the same as support. And losing that version of myself was the best thing that ever happened to my career.